To turn to the city itself, I show you now a plan of Herculaneum, or at least the excavated part of Herculaneum, that gives you some sense of what is there. And I've already mentioned that you won't see any big amphitheater in plan or any major forum complex and so on and so forth. We simply don't have that evidence in the excavated part. But what you do see is comparable to the residential area of Pompeii. You can see a series of major thoroughfares crossing with one another. We can't be sure, since we don't have the whole city, which is the main Cardo and which is the main decumanus of the city. But they are certainly laid out in a quite regular pattern with shops and houses interspersed with one another, as you can see extremely well here. Again, as far as we know, we really don't, well, we're quite sure we don't have any of the major public buildings, but there are a couple of structures here and there that do tell us something. Here's an arch, for example, that may have been on one of the more important thoroughfares of the city, and we certainly have shops and the like along the way, and I can actually show you a few views of shops and the city streets and so on that give you a good sense that Herculaneum was very similar looking to Pompeii. If you look at the street here, is the street from the city of Herculaneum. You can see the same multi-sided stones for the pavement. You can see the same sidewalks. You can see the same drains in Herculaneum. You can see the same rut marks. What you don't see, and I started a post on this yesterday, what you don't see are stepping stones. There are no preserved stepping stones in Herculaneum. There are lots of preserved stepping stones in Pompeii. And I was mulling this over yesterday in a way even beyond what I have tended to in the past about these stepping stones, thinking about, could I think of any other examples in any other Roman city I've ever been, including Rome itself, where there's actually quite a bit of preserved pavement here and there, out on the Via Appia, in the Roman Forum, and so on and so forth. And I can't think of a single other site off the top of my head where we find stepping stones. So I just put that out as a thought question for all of us to see whether I'm missing something, or whether it's conceivable that Pompeii may have been exceptional in this regard rather than the norm. Here we see amphoras, these clay amphoras in which wine or oil were kept, so a wine or an oil shop there. And then, of course, our favorite, the fast food stand, the thermopolium. Herculaneum had plenty of thermopolia, very similar to those in Pompeii. So you can imagine, for the most part, a quite similar looking city. I mentioned, though, that the evidence that we do have is mostly for residential architecture, and there are three houses in particular that I want to focus on because they give us information that goes beyond the information that I've been able to give you from the houses that we looked at in Pompeii. The first one I want to look at is the so-called Samnite house at Herculaneum. It dates to the 2nd century BC, and you see it in plan here. It's a very simple house. So 2nd century BC, that tells you what? It tells you that it's early, but it's already in that Hellenized Domus period, which began in the 2nd century BC. So we look to see which plan it conforms to. Does it conform to the Domus Italica or the Hellenized Domus? Well, at first it looks like it conforms to the Domus Italica, because you can see it's quite simple. It has the basic core. You come in here into the falques. There are cells on either side. The celli, these celli are indeed celli. They open up only to the house and not to the outside. They have not been transformed into shops. We see the atrium here. We see the impluvium of the atrium, and there was, of course, a compluvium up above. We see a very small number of cubicula, just a couple over here. And we don't seem to see the usual wings, unless this one over here, although there seems to be some sort of staircase on that side, served as, in part, as the wing. And one of those rooms, probably the left one, served as the dining room. There's no hortus, there's no peristyle. So again, at first it looks like a pretty simple example of an even simplified version of a typical Domus Italica. But when we walk into the atrium, which is very well preserved today, we see something quite different. The focus in this particular house was the atrium. You can tell it's an atrium. You can see the compluvium up above. We're looking here at the entranceway through the falques. These are the doors into the two cells, one on either side. This is a door into one of the one of the only two cubicula in this structure. You can see also that the patron and designer of this particular house you can see that this is a Hellenized domus in the sense that they have incorporated pilasters here on either side of the wall next to the entranceway. But most interesting of all is what has happened in what seems to be a second story for the atrium. They have expanded, they have moved, they have developed the atrium even more vertically than has been the case before by adding this blind gallery up at the top, which on three sides is again closed. You can see the enclosed wall, but on the fourth side, which I don't have an image to show you, the fourth side it's open, so there's an open loggia, there's open space between the columns. So blind gallery on three sides, open loggia on the other side. The open loggia, of course, adding additional light, bringing additional light into the atrium. So a very elaborate treatment of the atrium, which shows us not only the esteem in which this particular patron held the atrium, but also this interesting incorporation of columns in a different way than we've seen before, making them the high point of this room by placing them in the second story. They are ionic columns. Notice also this sort of lattice-work fence that encircles it. We'll see that kind of lattice-work fence also in Roman painting. You can see, in fact, the remains of some paint on the walls. So the walls behind this were painted. So a very opulent atrium that shows again this interest in building vertically and adding some interest at the uppermost part to create this sense of two stories. This is a development. This is in fact even early for that in the 2nd century BC.